this schedule really shapes up for a playoff run with a 12-team playoff.
Areas that, you need to get from experience, which is just, hey, I need to make quicker decisions.
How do you define success for this team?
National championship.
What's going on, y'all? Bud Elliott here of the Cover 3 College Football Podcast. This is my summer school series, and today it's UCLA. There's only one spot to head for that. Of course, Bruin Report Online. That's my man, David Woods, who always gives us the down low on these Bruins. David, welcome back, man.
Thanks, Bud. Always a pleasure.
So, pretty nice finish to the season. A little rocky start. I remember watching the Hawaii game. I was like, oh, my God. But they really kind of got it together down the stretch, and at least I think if I was a Bruin fan, gave me some things to root for. What's the overall vibe, I guess, from that program right now?
I think you nailed it. I think a lot of people, if the season had turned out the way it looked like it was headed in those first 4 or 5 games, where it was looking really, really rough, where it looked like Deshaun Foster truly was first-year head coach with the first-year head coach vibe going on, I think things would have had a very different tenor coming out of that season. But finishing the way they did, where they were not only winning some games, but also looking pretty competitive in games, I think that changed the vibe a little bit. And I think people are, I think they're just kind of cautious still in their impressions. I think it's been a long road of not great seasons for UCLA fans for, about 6 years now. But I think people are kind of cautiously optimistic, especially with, big recent transfer news, which I'm sure we're going to get into.
Indeed. So let's get into that with the offense. So new quarterback and new coordinator, dealer's choice. Who do you want first, and what should we know?
Let's talk about coordinator first. Tino Sunseri, he is the new offensive coordinator. He's coming in from Indiana, worked under Curt Cignetti for a while. What we've seen so far in spring, well, spring's now over. What we saw in spring is that it's going to look, I would say, pretty similar to that Indiana offense from a schematic standpoint. We saw a lot of 11 personnel. That's going to be the base. And for those who don't know, that's 1 tight end, 1 running back, and some 12 personnel. But for the most part, they're going to be trying to stretch horizontally, then try to attack some seams. It's like, I think a lot of offenses in the modern era, they're going to try to do a little bit of everything. But it looks like a real college offense. Whereas at times last year, Eric Bieniemy's did not look like it was maybe constructed sometime in the 1970s. So I think from that standpoint, I think it'll be potentially in this where we might transition to the quarterback, might be easier for a quarterback who's new to the system to come in and plug and play when he arrives over the summer.
So they land Nico out of Tennessee, and for all the the hubbub about how he left Tennessee and all this stuff, and was it a smart financial decision, et cetera, this is a pretty big get for the Bruins. Like, there's no way in the world you could tell me before all this went down that Tennessee was like, yeah, we want to trade Nico for Joey Aguilar, who was going to be the starter. Like, I mean, Nico, talent-wise, you really can't pass that up if you're the Bruins, right?
No, you couldn't. And, we watched Joey for one practice, really, because we had 4 open practices this spring where we could really dive in and watch quite a bit. And I saw him for one practice, and it was pretty rough. And so walking away from that one, and I'm sure the coaching staff was walking away from maybe that first couple of weeks of practice and saying, we don't necessarily have our answer at quarterback right now. And so then I think when there was the news about Nico and maybe there's a sundering with Tennessee, I think that was an obvious opportunity for UCLA to jump in, try to get the hometown kid back. For UCLA, it's a game changer. The talent at quarterback was not particularly good. There were a few pieces. Joey Aguilar had started at Appalachian State, so there was data on him as at least a credible group of 5 quarterback. But didn't look good in practice. But Robert McDaniel, a freshman who's since transferred out, he's pretty talented, but there wasn't a ton in this cupboard. So adding Nico, you're adding the obvious starter for next year. And I know I've heard from a lot of Tennessee fans since this happened that there was some, he wasn't good on the deep ball or wasn't good at this and that. And it's like, you don't know exactly what UCLA was working with, but take all of that. He's still going to be an upgrade over what they were planning on throwing out there this year. And I think for the offense in general, you add a quarterback to, they've got some decent pieces at receiver. They brought in a Cal running back, which we'll probably get to a little bit, and Javion Thomas, who will probably end up starting this year. The quarterback was the missing piece. They added one who for better or worse, he was a starter and, statistically a pretty good one in the SEC. So that's obviously a huge get for UCLA.
As you mentioned, an OC who's not afraid to kind of college it up if you need, especially watching what they did in Indiana. It's very collegey, which is not a knock. Obviously, you're playing college football, you should try to, as somebody who covered Jimbo for a long time, that was kind of a chief complaint.
Somebody who covered latter-day Chip Kelly. I'm all down for college offense.
Yes, exactly. So you mentioned those receivers. If you're playing college fantasy, who are we taking?
Quasi Gilmer. So he was a freshman last year. Shined. If you were watching closely, I mean, statistically, it's not going to probably blow you away. But if you were watching closely, when they needed a big play downfield, he was making it. He's a really good athlete, can catch the ball, but he's also just got that kind of playmaker vibe to him where if you need a contested catch, he's going to go make it. And the thing is, his hands aren't even that great, but he's got that kind of competitive concentration or whatever you want it, where that ball might bounce off his hands. He's going to catch it on the rebound. He's just got kind of that nice body control that you really can't teach, that comes from probably playing a ton of basketball and a ton of football from a very young age. He looks even better this spring. He looks like a guy who's going to kind of grow into his own as a sophomore. And it's clear the coaching staff has that confidence in him too. He is target one on a lot of plays. So that's a guy to absolutely watch. And another guy, Titus Mokiao-Atumalala, I was talking about him last year in this. He was a little dinged up all of last season, but he's a really good potential number two. And Mikey Matthews, who they brought in from Cal, kind of impressed me. I was not expecting much based on what I saw of Cal last year, but he's a lot shiftier and a lot more wiggly than I was expecting. And he clearly had already kind of drawn the trust of the quarterbacks who are here because he was a pretty pronounced target in the open practices we saw.
You mentioned Javion Thomas at running back. He's likely to be the guy there. Offensive line, what is our confidence level here?
Well, they've added a lot of guys who, were either, didn't quite work out at their previous spots, were previously highly rated, might be potential there. And from what I saw this spring, I think it's going to be better than it was last year. Now there's a long gap between better than it was last year and really good. And where this lands in between those two is going to be probably what makes or breaks this season. But some guys I actually kind of liked this spring, Julian Armella, who you're probably familiar with, Bud. He actually showed pretty well. Watching him in a couple of open practices, he's pretty good in one-on-ones, moves pretty well, looks like a playable guy at right guard, which is one of the spots they needed. And Cortland Ford, who's well-traveled at this point, was way back in the day a starter at USC at left tackle, then spent a couple of years at Kentucky. Never quite came together for him there, but he's been ensconced at left tackle all spring. He looks playable there. And if you followed UCLA at all last year, left tackle was a nightmare. They were down to two different walk-ons at different points. So now they're going to have Cortland Ford. Ruben Unije is back. He's playing at right tackle now, but he has some left tackle experience. So they've got more depth. They've got more bodies. And I would say the talent level has improved. So I think if you're, trying to scan and see whether this offense could be better, you look at quarterback, that's an upgrade. A good offensive line, probably better. I think this offense, if Tino Sunseri is what he is billed as being, it could surprise some people this year.
Is there a guy we have not mentioned on this offense who maybe if he hits his ceiling a year early or finally plays to his potential, who could really take this thing to a different level?
One guy I'll mention, just because running back, we don't totally know about Javion Thomas. I mean, he was a part-time starter. I mean, he played quite a bit at Cal, but he would be vaulting into a bigger role. There's still a lot of room in the depth chart for somebody to show up. And Carson Cox, the true freshman, who was a highly rated 4-star, he impressed in the spring showcase, not spring game, on Saturday. He's an explosive guy. There's room in this running back depth chart for a freshman to actually play this year. And if he looks kind of like he did in that spring showcase, I wouldn't be surprised if he does. He's shifty, he's fast, he's explosive. And if you're looking for one thing this offense kind of still needs, it's a little bit more explosive playmaking. Cox could provide it.
Awesome. All right, let's hit a break here. When we come back, a little UCLA Bruin defense.
When you need your sports news all the time,
we've got breaking news to bring to you.
CBS Sports HQ gives you a snapshot of all the sports that matter to you. When you need your sports in a snap, find it on CBS Sports HQ, streaming free anywhere you are.
All right, y'all, welcome back here to the Cover 3 College Ball Podcast, Summer School Edition, talking UCLA with my man David Woods of Bruin Report Online. So defense last year kept this team in games probably more than I thought it would, given what they had lost on the defensive line to the draft following that 2023 season, and of course at linebacker as well. This year, D coordinator returns. A lot of the players who made that happen do not. What are we looking at here?
Yeah, I think so. I think nobody can fully account for how well Akaika Malloy did last year in building last year's defense. If you remember, the conversation was all about, oh, they lost Danton Lynn. This is going to take a major step back because Danton Lynn had been a horrible defense into a very good one in a single offseason with much of the same players. Well, then Akaika Malloy did a thing that was almost as impressive, which is without Leatu Latu, without the Murphy twins, without really a great base pass rush, still producing a credible defense that kept UCLA in games. He did, help to uncover Femi Oladejo, moved him from linebacker to edge rusher, and now Femi's in the NFL as a second rounder. And Carson Schlesinger was there, and nobody was playing him. But then Kaika decided to play him, and ends up a second rounder. So I think Malloy is he's shown his chops now, and I think there's a confidence that he's going to figure some things out. The big issue looking at this team is looking at this defense is edge rush. We said it last year, and then Femi Oladejo showed up. Thing is, there's not an obvious guy in that linebacker core who could move up to edge rusher. And what they've added in the transfer portal, Nico DeVilliers, Keyshawn Bennett, Anthony Jones, none of these guys have been super productive as pass rushers. And what they have currently on the roster, Grant Bucky, Devin Ayupiu, neither of them is in an ideal world even really an edge. They're kind of defensive ends / maybe even 3 techs in a 4-3 old system. So that's probably the big limiting factor. I like generally how they've replaced the other guys, and I'm sure we'll get into it position by position, but I would say edge rush, their ability to produce a base edge rush is going to be a limiting factor again, and it's going to require Malloy to get creative in ways that he had to last year. And there were times they got burned because the reality is you've got to get creative when you can't get a base pass rush. And I think that's going to be the case again this year.
So what are we thinking on the back five if they do have to blitz a lot more?
Well, they have a lot of guys. So new secondary coach Demetrius Martin has brought in, let me get the full count here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 new transfers. That's transfers, not even counting the freshmen who've come in between the 2 corner, 2 safety, and nickel spot. So there are a lot of bodies. A lot of these guys were formerly highly rated guys who either didn't work out at their previous places, or in the case of a guy like Aaron Williams, had a odd thing happen where he had one leg slightly longer than the other and had to get corrective surgery as soon as he was in at his former institution. So he ended up here. But there's a lot of potential here. I would say looking at it and looking at the spring, there's some guys that caught my eye. Key Lawrence, who, did some stuff at Ole Miss. He looked like a real guy in spring, making a lot of plays. Cole Martin, who's Demetrius Martin's son, probably moves the best out of anybody in this secondary. Just really fluid hips, changes direction really, really well. He actually had a hip injury. Maybe that helped. I don't know. But he's back from that, and he looks pretty good. One returner who's probably going to play quite a bit at safety is Croy Stewart. He played a lot last year for the first time, and he really showed up well. Cornerback, there are so many guys here that it's hard to imagine them not producing at least a couple guys who can really play. But who those guys are going to be at this point is kind of still up in the air. Robert Stafford seems to have taken on a lot of the first string reps. Jameer Benjamin, who's a redshirt freshman holdover from last year, he was taking the first string reps at the other corner by the end of spring. We liked him last year, so that makes some sense. But there's a lot of names here. Kanye Clark, who was a former walk-on great athlete, he tore his ACL last year. He's making his way back. He could also compete to start. Roderick Pleasant, who was at Oregon, and Oregon's kind of a stacked team, so he never really found a great role there. He's a great athlete, and he might, easily compete for the 2 deep here. So there's a lot of names here and a lot of potential that now, can any secondary hold up for long against when they don't have a pass rush up front? Maybe not, but I think they're going to be pretty well stocked here.
They also might be playing with some more points on their own scoreboard than they were last year. So that'll be interesting to see how that changes up. David, this schedule is, you kind of better get it early or you might have some trouble down the stretch, depending, of course, on how Washington, USC, and Nebraska are. But you start with a non-conference game against Utah in the Rose Bowl, so that's interesting. And then at UNLV, which you should win, but what is a successful season in year 2 for UCLA with Deshaun Foster?
I mean, I think it's kind of the same thing as what I was saying preseason last year. I think they need to make a bowl. And last year they fell just short of that, but I think it was competitive enough at the end that it kind of fit the criteria for people. I think this one has to be a little bit over that. I mean, you brought in Nico, which I think raises expectations. And I think, again, as we just talked about, the offense is going to be better. So I think if you say, well, maybe the defense takes a slight step back, it's an offensive sport. If the offense takes a big step up, which I think it might, then this needs to be a bowl team and have that be kind of the floor. And I think anything above that, I think kind of gets people into their happy place, but I think bowl is kind of minimum expectations for UCLA this year.
It does seem that they play hard for Foster.
Yes.
Which should be kind of a prerequisite, but at the same time, I wonder, and this is not like a curmudgeonly, the guys don't care, but I do think in the NIL era, it is a little bit harder to keep, especially with the way the transfer portal is currently constructed. It's hard to keep a team together and playing hard through 12 games if you've missed your goals. And they had missed their goals in for like a lot of the bigger goals for the season. They were still playing hard. That's to, I think that's to his credit, man.
I mean, I think archetypes for going to CFB 25. I think he's definitely got the motivator archetype. I think he can get these guys going, and I think he gets them locked in. And there's, I think, a good sense of they want to do it for him, and I think there's that full sense of things. So I think that's the thing I'll say about Deshaun is that was he an experienced head coach? Definitely not. And were there some flubs early season? Throw away the media day thing, but were there some 4th down decisions?
Why?
You're just sitting there what's going on here?
Did they have 9 men on punt team?
Yeah, there was a lot of that stuff. And so these are rookie mistakes. And the thing I'll say about him, he learned from a lot of that stuff. Back half of the year, making much, much better decisions generally. Game management was improved. And that's all dealt the hand that UCLA fans were dealt with, the Chip Kelly leaving, Deshaun Foster being hired late. All you could be asking for is that he learns on the job, gets better as he goes. And I think that's been pretty obvious and clear, through that season all the way to the end. So the hope is now he takes another step up this season and is a good game manager from the beginning and handles things better than he did to start last year.
David, enjoyed this as always. I feel like I am really schooled up on the Bruins, and we'll see you soon, buddy. Going to Vegas?
Thank you. Oh, yeah. See you there, man.
See you there.